Okay, I believe we're recording. So this is today's lecture on the post-Hahnemannian miasms. So the focus is going to be on the tubercular miasm. So I'll present you a PowerPoint slideshow on it. And I've got some notes on the side. Let me start to share my screen with you. And we'll start over here. Okay. So welcome everybody, and this is obviously going to be the first in a series of many lectures that I will give in this way. Please give me feedback in whichever way you can, via WhatsApp, on the Moodle, or via the class rep, email. I'm happy with all systems. Okay, let's get going. So firstly, what is the tubercular miasm? And Hahnemann spoke of something called pseudosora. So he didn't actually specifically give it a name of a tubercular miasm. That came on quite a few years later on, probably in the mid sort of around about the 1850s. So the pseudosora that he was speaking about, he said it was sora that had a touch of the syphilitic miasm. And in fact, we can also see that it has quite a bit of the psychotic miasm as well. So the syphilitic miasm has the destructive parts in it, which we've covered, and the psychotic miasm has got that kind of daredevil attitude, looking for action, even if it's dangerous, although hiding the fear on the other side. So later, this pseudosora, or the tubercular miasm as it became known, was identified specifically with a disease, with tuberculosis, which in a way followed on from the syphilis pandemic that went through Europe. This was the new pandemic, sometime from the 1800s through the 1850s and onwards. Obviously, tuberculosis is very much with us today, and we still have to deal with it. Okay. So let's look at what are the main keynotes of the tubercular miasm. And here I've put the idea that change is the most important thing. There's really there's a tremendous desire and a need for change. I've just got to have the change. So that means that I'm not satisfied with what is. There's a lot of boredom, and Calc-Phos is a famous remedy that has boredom as a keynote. So this we can see is very important, particularly in teenagers, younger children who are not happy with the structured school experience they're having. They want to get out into the world. They want to see change. They want to travel. They really want to get into life. And here they're having to learn about how much cotton is grown in Egypt, and geography and physics and chemistry, and in a most boring and sort of structured way, which doesn't suit this mindset. So they need to move in the body and the mind. So again, here we would see that as that classic sort of ADD child, attention deficit disorder. It's not that they initially don't want to pay attention. They're dissatisfied with what they see. They need something new. So the mind jumps around a lot, and the body also moves. So to sit still in a classroom is a terrible thing for a young tubercular child. We can imagine many little boys, what they really want to be doing is running around and jumping around all over the place. It is quite interesting that we see young children who are so-called classified with ADD or ADHD, that the only time they can sit still is when they're on a computer program, playing a computer game, watching a video. Well, this is the interesting thing, is now they don't need to move the body because the mind is seeing all this novelty. It's got all this movement. It's got all this change happening. It's got all this unexpected things. So then they're quite satisfied and they can sit and pay attention to it because this is playing to their needs of change. Another factor in the, as a keynote of the tubercular miasm, is that time is short. So here we see something like, again, it's that rush to get things done, that need to get on top of things, to get out there. So quite a lot of artistic geniuses could not cope with being in school, and they really rushed their way through. They left early, or they finished their matric at a very young age because they really want to get into life. They want to get going with things. They want to do interesting stuff. They want to do different things. So they feel that there isn't much time to do all of this. They need to get a move on. So there's much for them to do. They've got a lot to accomplish. You can think about many great artists, and I'll speak about that a bit later, that produce a lot of great work at a very young age, and perhaps some researchers as well. But it's more in the kind of the artistic, creative side. There's a need. Well, what this does is when time is short and you have a lot to do, is you tend to burn the candle at both ends. That means that you working, creating, making, meeting, doing things, and then it's time to sleep and you say, no, don't want to bother with that. Let's just keep going. Burning the candle at both ends, of course, is a problem. There's no recovery or rest. Instead, they're just getting constant stimulation and change. And ultimately, that leads to burnout and destruction. And we can see here why the disease of TB comes in so strongly, because this is a disease of burnout and destruction. Often destruction of the lung tissues, but it can be of other organs in the body as well. But there's generally, in the end, great tiredness, collapse, and can do no further. And without treatment, of course, there's death. So the tubercular constitution is somewhat refined, aesthetic, and I've put there, can be delicate. You'd see very fine features, big expressive eyes, often long eyelashes, even in men. And in good health, there's fine bones, muscle, and posture. So look at the photo in the right-hand corner. That is a famous Nigerian Afrobeat legend called Fela Kuti. It's probably him in his prime, sometime in the mid or late 1970s. So that, I think, is very much a personality who I've described as tubercular. Yes, there's pretty much high energy and relentless stamina. So there we have Fela Kuti, and here's a YouTube video you can watch. Just to go back there, yeah, he very much in his prime, very much a socially conscious person. He had a classical education in music in London, but he rejects that. It's too kind of boring, it's too staid for him. But the ideas give him, gets ideas to develop new forms of music. He creates the Afrobeat with a big band in Nigeria. He really, and his songs are quite revolutionary. They're critical of what's happening around him. Now, in poor health, where the tubercular constitution is, this would be more the picture of a person who has TB. They'd be too thin, round-shouldered, and a poor posture. And as opposed to the TB constitution or tubercular constitution in good health, which has high energy and relentless stamina. Here there's low energy and low stamina. And as I've said before, think about a typical tuberculosis case. So what are some of the physical consequences of the tubercular miasm? Mainly on the respiratory system. People could talk about you patients. There's not enough time to draw a proper breath in. So it's interesting that time comes in and there's a proper breath to fill up the lungs, cannot fill up the lungs. And there's also sometimes no time to hold the breath. So time is this big issue in the tubercular miasm. If you can't hold the breath, you can't conserve your energy. There's damage to the lungs, often not necessarily from tuberculosis, it could be from bronchitis, pneumonias, or other respiratory tract infections or inflammations. Constriction and restriction become up. So this desperate need to move outwards, to travel, to expand is met with constriction and restriction. So we see the physical symptom of lung fibrosis from tuberculosis. There's a weight loss, and this is despite eating very well, eating a lot, just can't maintain their weight, just can't get the food, the protein, whatever it is, to stick on their body. It just seems to burn right off. Phosphorus, iodine, and other iodatums are well known for this. Let's look at the world view and some cultural expressions. So starting from the Romantic poets in Europe, the 1800s onwards, we have Keats, Shelley, Byron. They had a tremendous artistic output, producing huge amounts of poetry, novels, books, plays, whatever. And they just worked day and night. For them, sleep was optional. And most of them died early in their 20s or 30s, and most of them died of tuberculosis, which in those days, this is before Koch's discovery, was called consumption. So the pop stars of the 20th century, in some ways follow a similar route, many of them, probably people a bit before your time, but it still is an issue. The pop star who lives life too fast, too quick, too wide, and things go wrong. These above ones all died young after very short, amazing careers. Quite often they are revolutionary, rebellious, and defiant. So we can think about on the one hand, the ADHD child is revolutionary. We think about the great artists like the ones described above. And one of my particular favorites from the African continent is Fela Kuti. Totally revolutionary, rebellious and defiant, but very creative, very clever, producing wonderful work, a real sort of shining light. And shining light reminds me of phosphorus. Phosphor means the bearer of light. So there's a strong artistic, creative bent in those who would need the tubercular remedies. And one place we can look at that is in the mineral kingdom, and that would be row 5, the silver series in the periodic table. Some of the remedies, perhaps strontium and palladium, are not all that well known, but we know about argentum. It's a remedy for people who are like lecturers or preachers who talk too much, sing too much, and their vocal cords become sore, or they have some sort of pathology that they get worn out. And stannum further along the silver series, that is where the collapse sets in. And stannum actually is a very good remedy for tuberculosis, and perhaps even been mooted for the severe collapse that we see in the COVID-19 cases, those that are in stage 3. So there are quite a few nosodes that have been produced that are part of the tubercular miasm. Tuberculinum bovinum, tub-bov, or just tub is the main one that we know about, and that's drawn from cattle, from TB in cattle. Now, I'm just going to show you a big, long list here afterwards. I don't think at this point we need to go into too much detail, other than the second one, Tuberculinum aviare. So that's drawn from a tuberculosis infection in a chicken, and it may have some issues to do with the current respiratory pandemic that we're facing as well. But just be aware of that there are these others, and the main one that for you to know is tub-bov, and perhaps look up something that you can find on tub-A, aviare. The main remedies, I've drawn this primarily from David Lilly's work, and David Lilly's presented seminars from about 2014, I think, until about a year or two ago, and he covered the main 5 miasms, the Hahnemannian miasms and the 2 extra, that is the tubercular miasm and the cancerinic miasm, which we'll do next. And I regard him as really probably one of the world experts in this field. So these are remedies that you should be aware of. Be aware, of course, that many of them are multi-miasmatic. We can see over here, for instance, lycopodium would have elements of soric nature as well. And sulfur, of course, has a soric. There's a very strong anti-soric. I think of the main ones really to think of are the phosphates, phosphorus, phosphoric acid. They really, if you know those remedies well, then you'll understand the tubercular miasm. The nosodes, we've already spoken a bit about them, the tuberculinums, the bacillinums. And David Lilly put sorinum as well as a possible nosode to be used where we are looking to do treatment of the tubercular miasm. He speaks about the bowel nosodes as well, and it's these bowel nosodes in particular. Those are referenced from David Lilly. I think this will be an upcoming book from those lectures and seminars he gave us, which will be called the chronic miasms. And here are some references to look at on the, just 2 references. If you can get hold of Dr. David Lilly's seminars on the chronic miasm, you could perhaps contact COMED and ask them if it's possible to get the CD that were the recordings of it and some of the notes. And a book that is available in the library, which is Hahnemann Revisited, very readable and very good on the classical approach classical Hahnemannian approach to the miasms. Thank you very much.